Hey, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Imagine working with your team on a project and you're trying to do everything over email. Things seem to work well enough at the beginning, but once you start adding more than a couple of people or sharing more than a couple of files, the entire project becomes disorganized. Managing projects is tough enough. It's a struggle to juggle people, work, and expectations under pressure. Problem is, many project management platforms make it even harder by overcomplicating things, leading teams to abandon tools when the promise fades and frustration sets in. That's when teams turn to Basecamp. Famously straightforward and effective, teams stick with it and projects thrive on it. Basecamp makes collaborating on projects easy without having to waste time. Teams that use Basecamp send less emails and have fewer meetings. If you are struggling with projects, sign up for Basecamp. Their pricing is simple and they give you all their features in a single plan. No upsells, no upgrades. Go to basecamp.com/MPN and try Basecamp for free. No credit card required and cancel anytime. Thanks to Basecamp for sponsoring the Marketing Podcast Network. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Jamie Lieberman hosts a great podcast called the Unbusiness Podcast. Jamie, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
The Unbusiness Podcast provides interviews with real-life entrepreneurs to talk about their struggles, their strategies, and how they have had success and what they've done in the face of failure. It is a real-life look at what it means to own your own business and gives you real takeaways on how you can make yours better.
Awesome. Where can people subscribe?
Go to #legal.com/podcasts. Find the show at marketingpodcasts.net or search for the Unbusiness Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Mark DiCristina.
Advertising is, there's a lot of hyperbole, there's a lot of, chest thumping and all kinds of things in advertising. And it's really important to me and to my team that we sort of maintain a really clear-eyed view of who are we really? And what can we say really confidently and deliver on, every single day.
Mark DiCristina is the Vice President of Brand Experience at MailChimp. He and his team are responsible for ensuring that MailChimp's brand shows up in thoughtful and authentic ways. During his time at MailChimp, Mark spearheaded many of the brand's largest marketing initiatives, such as the launch of Wink, MailChimp's in-house agency, and has been fundamental in the creation of MailChimp's creative ad campaigns, most recently, Guess Less, Sell More. Mark was responsible for the company's first major ad campaign, Did You Mean Mailchimp, which won the Cyber Grand Prix at the 2017 Cannes Lions Festival, and the legendary MailKimp ad on NPR's Serial podcast, which landed mentions on Saturday Night Live, The Colbert Report, and Funny or Die. Mark, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk.
Your bio took care of what I don't want to mix animals here, but I'll say the elephant in the room with MailChimp is, as I was thinking about this very interview, I'm like, I'm going to make some awkward reference to the MailKimp thing. And and there it was right there. So we could just get it out in the open early because, of course, that's for so many listening when it comes to MailChimp marketing. Our first instinct may be to mispronounce the name. So first of all, I have to ask to kind of get heady about MailKimp. How did that come up as this is the approach that we should go with here?
It's amazing that it's been quite a long time since Serial, that first season of Serial in 2014. But to this day, people still have this incredibly powerful association with that podcast and with MailChimp, and specifically with the mispronunciation of our name. It was obviously something that was huge for MailChimp in terms of our visibility, but it's also just such a powerful thing that's gotten stuck in. It's stuck in my head as much as anybody else's. So it's amazing. I mean, just to quickly sort of recap how it happened. I mean, MailChimp had been sponsoring podcasts for a long time. By the time the Serial came out, podcasting was certainly growing very quickly in terms of, it's the total audience of people who were listening to podcasts, and more and more, different types of podcasts were coming out in terms of the subject material. Celebrities were starting to do podcasts, but it was still, Serial really was sort of the breakout moment for podcasting. But we had been sponsoring podcasts for a long time prior to Serial. And one of the reasons we had been such a big supporter in that space is because of what we identified as the power of that platform in terms of branding and in terms of the just the authenticity. We supported a lot of shows, and we had lots of podcast hosts who had they had great relationships with their audiences, and they were able to speak really authentically about MailChimp to those audiences. And so we just found that there was a very, very powerful, it's a powerful medium for storytelling, obviously, but it's also a very powerful medium for advertising, to be able to get our name, directly into people's ears through the vehicle of someone that they really trust, speaking authentically about our brand. I mean, it was a sort of a no-brainer, and we could see very clearly how impactful it was in terms of results for MailChimp. So we had been a sponsor of lots of podcasts prior to Serial. We had done some things with NPR, with This American Life, and we had actually gotten a lot of positive feedback about the ads that we did. With This American Life specifically, we used to make hats for, like, monkey hats. This is it's kind of a crazy rabbit hole, but we used to make these hand knit monkey hats that had little mail hats on top of the hats. So it was like a little MailChimp hat. We used to make those for people, and we gave them away. And then someone had this idea that we should make tiny ones to put on cats and small dogs, which we ended up doing. And so we had this ad on This American Life about how, MailChimp is this, email marketing platform. We help you grow your business, And we also make hats for cats and small dogs. It was sort of how the ad ended. And evidently, the folks at This American Life were blown away by the response they got to this ad. They had never gotten so much feedback. People writing in, calling in, asking, "Is that real? Can I get one of those hats?" And it was just a really funny thing. And so, because of that relationship and the positive response to that ad, they approached us before Serial launched, and they wanted to see if we wanted to do something, around this new show. We obviously had no idea what a huge cultural moment it would be, but there had never been anything like Serial before that. I mean, I was an avid listener of podcasts. I'd obviously been sponsoring a lot of podcasts. And the idea that, someone would tell one story over a season, it would be this true crime thing. It was really, really compelling. And I thought that it was going to be a great show. And so we went, we sort of went big on it in terms of just sponsoring as much of it and getting as much share of voice around that podcast as we could. And the spot itself was something that the Serial team made for us. So we gave them a script, and they had the idea that they would sort of record it, sort of man on the street style. And they gave us two options. One option was sort of a straight read, and the other option was this weird thing where this young woman mispronounced our name. And we really felt like, it seemed a little bit crazy, but we couldn't get it out of our heads. And we thought, let's try the weird one. I think it's going to, I think that one will actually be a lot stickier and more impactful. And it, I guess the rest is history. But that's the very long, winding explanation of how we got there. But yeah, it was it was a game changer for us for sure.
Well, and the choice, I mean, I just like that as kind of a general rule for folks listening out there. When you've got a couple different options, it's always worth swinging for the fences with with the weird one.
Absolutely.
And because of that, I mean, you mentioned in your bio kind of the send ups of Serial, but MailChimp was a part of most of those. And just to kind of, it's amazing how that really kind of coupled itself with, if you're going to lampoon something, you look at what are all of the different pieces of it, and in all of those, MailChimp is a piece of that. So it's an amazing. I mean, I think definitely, like you said, it helps when there's something like Serial, which is pretty remarkable itself.
Mhm.
But then that relationship, the connect. I mean, it's the two are inextricably linked.
They are. Yeah. And I think the other thing that we, looking back on it, I think part of why it worked so well in terms of, just becoming such a positive association. I mean, this is an ad that runs at the beginning of what became, many millions of people's like favorite podcast.
Yeah.
And people loved it. And it became a mnemonic for the show. People would talk about, listening to the new episode of MailKimp, or they would there were people on Twitter who were mad when, another advertiser came and, bought a spot on Serial, and they, they felt like it belonged to MailChimp, like things that I really have never seen in advertising before. But I think one thing we did that I'm proud of is that as all of this, stuff was happening in terms of the show getting so big and MailChimp getting so much notoriety around it, is that we just kept our mouth shut. We didn't try to, jump on the bandwagon and make a bunch of jokes back to everyone and try to get a bunch of attention for ourselves around it. I really am proud of the fact that we had the restraint to be able to say, like, this is a thing that's happening in culture. People are really enjoying it. They love the ad. Like, we don't need to try so hard to take advantage of it. Let's just let it ride. And I think by, just kind of playing it cool, I think that's part of what allowed it to continue to build. And I felt pretty strongly at the time that like interjecting ourselves too directly into that narrative would kind of burst the bubble a little bit. And I think that also worked in our favor.
Wow. I mean, that's really good advice. And as I heard you say that, I'm like, oh, it feels like that would be easy for so many brands to miss. Hey, let's respond, let's be a part of in this kind of always on and engagement, sparking more engagement and content, creating more content, marketers gonna market.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
we don't want the brand to show up and ruin it. So I think that's amazing. And, you talked about, the sponsorship and it working. And I was going to follow up and say, talk through, like, how do we know that works? And honest to goodness, full disclosure, I will rewind. I have been a MailChimp user myself for years. And I'm rewinding all of this, and I'm like, when did I become? It was because of that. I'd been with another provider, and I wasn't happy, and I wanted something that was a little more flexible and easy to use, and it made it into the consideration set.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was step one, but I think the other step in that is something else that shows up in your in your work, and that is making sure that MailChimp shows up as thoughtful and authentic. Because
Mm-hmm.
you talked about, we didn't insert ourselves into a lot of that cultural zeitgeist talk
Mm-hmm.
around Serial. But it made it into the brand, into the consideration set. And then when I got there, I did feel like, I'm in marketing, so it's the probably a creative professional type. But I arrived there and I felt like this is a brand that's really speaking to me. And I still, I set up a campaign yesterday, the day before we're recording this, and all the things from the fun launch screens to the hand-drawn sketches, it feels authentic and thoughtful, and that A word is a pretty big thing to tackle. So how do you benchmark for thoughtful and authentic?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one thing I'll just say, first of all, great to have you as a customer. But I think, but you are the target audience, and I think that's one thing we think a lot about as marketers at MailChimp is that we are marketing a marketing platform, and so very naturally we have to make sure that the things that we're doing to promote this product not only tell the story of the product, but we do it in a way that is going to resonate with the audience who is, you do this for a living. You talk to a lot of marketers. Like you really, you have in order to come across in the way that it sounds like we are, like we have to really know what we're doing. And we would like to show up in a way that demonstrates our expertise, not just at building the platform, but as marketers ourselves. And so we start from a place of like just wanting to tell the truth. I mean, I think that, it's advertising is, there's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of, chest thumping and all kinds of things in advertising. And it's really important to me and to my team that we sort of maintain a really clear-eyed view of like, who are we really? And like, what can we say really confidently and deliver on, every single day? So it starts with what's true. And then it also is about being, obviously being different and standing out, but doing it in a meaningful way. So in a way that's going to be valuable to the audience that we're trying to serve. And so, yeah, being truthful and being ourselves, I think, is another big thing. And that's also been a sort of a pillar of our brand for a long time. Again, going back to this idea of marketing to marketers. I mean, I would tell any marketer that like, being yourself and finding ways to sort of find that intersection of truthfulness and meaningful differentiation, like that's really the sweet spot you want to be in. And so we want to make sure that we are doing that ourselves, walking the walk, but that we're also, a brand that other marketers can look at and see as inspiration. That like we've been very successful and we've grown by being true to ourselves and leaning into the things that make us unique and different in a meaningful way.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
You may know you are listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Izzy House hosts a great podcast called the Space Marketing Podcast. Izzy, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Space Marketing Podcast is where we explore marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. I talk space with some very interesting industry professionals about their challenges and successes with marketing in the new commercial space economy. This show is for business leadership, entrepreneurs, and the space curious.
Wow. And where in the universe can people subscribe?
All of the major channels, and you can also find it on MPN and spacemarketingpodcast.com.
You heard her. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business too? Caroline Kay hosts a great podcast called Snippets of Genius. Caroline, tell us what these folks will get out of listening.
Snippets of Genius is a lighthearted business podcast with some brilliant insights into how you can attract and cultivate success. In each episode, I have an inspiring conversation with genius guests from the worlds of business development, marketing, design, and wellness. Each of them share their ballsy, daring moves to burst business opportunities wide open. Every episode is designed to give you as much value as possible so you can decide, define, and develop anything you want in your career or business.
Hard to turn that down. Where can people subscribe?
They can come on over to my website, which is www.carolinekay.co/podcast, or find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Snippets of Genius wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So, as VP of Brand Experience, I feel like experience is another one of those words I called authenticity, the A word, because it's a little hard to get our arms around. Experience is kind of the same way, because in a lot of ways it's the sum total of all of our parts, but that can be a lot. And I think one thing that I always cite when I talk about brand building, as a great touch point on the part of Mailchimp was the animated chimp pushing the big red button when it's time to launch the campaign. And I always highlight that because, one, I think a lot of times people think that with big brands that there's a lot of stuff that it's a big brand, it would be hard for us to do that. But like, clever design and writing is an accessible tool, and baking that into those moments is easy to do, but also easy to miss. So how do you find moments like that big red launch button?
Yeah. I think one place to start is just having empathy for your customer, like putting yourself in their shoes and trying to, experience what they're experiencing. And so we know that for a lot of our customers, the moment when they push send on a campaign that's going to go out to, it could be going to a few people, it could be going to 1 million people. Generally, when you're pushing that button, regardless of the total size of the audience, it feels really big, and it feels like any typo that's in there, everyone's going to see it. It's my business may be hanging in the balance of how the performance of this email. I mean, who knows? But it's a stressful moment to push send, and so that's it's about having empathy, putting yourself in their shoes. And also really being tuned into the mind state and the emotional state at different parts of that experience. So, obviously that moment of pushing send is a stressful moment, but the moment after you push send should be a moment of relief. And so on the following screen, we might have something that's more playful, or when you're creating the campaign, you might be in a mind state that's more exploratory, and you're looking for ideas. And so I think that's, a really simple thing is like thinking about that whole journey that your customer is on with you, and how they might be feeling at different points in that journey. And just, being thoughtful and communicating in a way that lets them know that, there's someone home, that this brand isn't just a giant faceless corporation, but there's someone at this company who sees you, who's thought about what you're experiencing and is, sort of saying hello through the copy or through that, animation or whatever.
I love that idea that you were talking about of showing up like someone's at home, because I think a lot of times it's easy to miss those moments. And I think that the current MailChimp screen is that I have up is the rock on high five, and it certainly feels that way. And there's all these little moments, these things, these tools that we use in our e-commerce and our shopping carts that come with pre-populated copy that says, "Thank you, if your form submission is now complete."
Yeah,
and step one would be giving that some personality, and step two would be just, what could this be? And I think those things, those little moments are easy to miss. We sometimes look for in experiential, it feels like sometimes we have a tendency to zoom out to the really big instead of zooming in to those moments like you were mentioning.
Yeah, and it really is zooming in where there's such a, I feel like that's where the real opportunity is, because it's when it becomes obvious to you that, someone has really thought through those details, and they've really crafted the little moments. That's when it feels more personal. That's when it feels more, it's more resonant on a human level. I mean, it's very impressive to see, a giant campaign or a giant activation where, a brand has spent millions of dollars and, pulled something off that, you blows your mind. I think that's also very cool, but it can also be very cool to, the copywriting on the back of the product or, in the unboxing. That's sometimes where really, really special, there's really special opportunities there as well.
So talk us through transferring the successful brand experience that is using MailChimp as a platform to interacting with Wink, MailChimp's in-house agency.
Yeah. So Wink is we have this internal agency that they are responsible for all the advertising we do, the brand design work, a lot of the production even that we do with photography and video and motion design, all happens in-house at MailChimp. And that's been a journey for us, probably like many brands. I mean, when we were a very young brand, I mean, I've been at MailChimp since 2009, when it was a very small company. Back then, we did just about everything in-house. We did it, and we worked that way for 5 or 6 years with a pretty scrappy team. And we grew very quickly. But we reached a point where, we had never done a big, global brand campaign. We were in this position where we felt like we needed to figure out how to, sort of be the same MailChimp, but on a much bigger stage with a larger budget and a big media campaign. And so we went out and we worked with some fantastic agencies, had some amazing experiences, continued to grow the brand. But over time began to feel like, we always felt such a close sense of ownership about the brand. We always felt like there's so much great creativity within the walls at MailChimp. And so after working with some great agencies on some very successful campaigns, we started coming back to the idea that, there was some real magic for MailChimp when we do things in-house. And so over the last couple of years, we've been on this journey to really build up this in-house creative team that we call Wink Creative. And it's been really, really fun. We just launched a big global campaign in September called Guess Less, Sell More that, end to end, we did the whole thing, conceived, strategy, production. It was an in-house job. And I'm really, really proud of it.
Well, that's awesome, and not an easy feat either. As you mentioned, those are very different businesses, from being a MarTech platform to the service-focused agency world too. So those aren't always. It's not easy to transfer brand competencies from one to the other, but certainly sounds well done. Well, we started our conversation with a big smile about MailKimp. Now it is time, Mark, for me to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
I mean, I guess it's probably been a couple of months, but I cannot stop thinking about Yvon Chouinard in Patagonia and how he, how he said that what did he say? Earth is our only shareholder. Mm-hmm. I mean, just one of the most, just stunning. I mean, it makes me smile, but it also, sort of makes me just sort of stare off into the distance. It's like, what an amazing, I mean, what a legend. I mean, Patagonia was already just, so iconic for, in so many different ways, and he's always been, I mean, when you talk about authenticity and, in brands, I mean, I don't know that there's anyone that I would put above Patagonia. I mean, they've always had such an incredible story and a point of view, and the values that just come through in everything that they do is incredible. But, that was just that announcement and sort of just the whole thing is just stunning, amazing.
I agree that they certainly lead in authenticity, transparency as a brand, and I talk about brand a lot out in the world, and I cite them. And, sometimes you have the baggage of talking about some of the same brands. I mean, because we all love Patagonia and Nike doing great, bold things. And every now and then it kind of nags you. It's like, oh God, they're going to hear, I'm going to talk about Patagonia. They probably know it. And I was speaking at an event that week and that happened. And I'm like, just when you think that this might be a tired example, they go and raise the stakes even further. So no, definitely. I like your looking off in the middle of the distance when you hear that. It's like, what are any of the rest of us doing?
Very
well,
cool.
I have a feeling I might know the answer to this, Mark, but where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. LinkedIn's probably the best place to see me and get in touch. I mean, I'm not particularly active on social, but yeah, I'm around on LinkedIn, and that's the best place.
And of course, MailChimp.
And MailChimp, yeah, certainly.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Mark, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks, Nick. It's been fun.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.